everybody to what we think will be a really, really interesting session on how consumer behaviors are changing already in the era of AI. I'm joined by three great leaders from some of the leading companies in the world who are already actively taking steps on this agenda. And without further ado, I want to ask each of them to introduce themselves, and then I'll do a little bit of commentary, and then we'll get into some questions to the panelists. And then what I'm going to do is at the end reserve about 10 minutes for questions from you as well. So just please hold that in the back of your mind for questions, and at the end we can adjourn for some refreshments. That'll be great. So Naveen, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, I guess, almost. Naveen Manga, Global CIO, Marriott International. Been in this role for about 6 months. Prior to that was a CTO for about 4.5 years with Marriott.
That's great. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm Jenny Weber. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Best Buy, and my team helps drive our brand strategy all the way through to execution. I also have the privilege of leading our membership team and our customer insights organization.
And good afternoon. I'm Chris Wright. I'm the Chief Information Digital Officer for Nestle. And our team helps to drive our enterprise digital transformation and make sure that it runs day to day.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everybody. So just a bit of context for the conversation. The thing that we are already practically seeing is that AI is already driving what we think is now the largest change in what consumers buy, where they buy, and also when they choose to buy as well. Certainly that we've seen since the advent of the smartphone, and it may even be more profound than that. And as I mentioned, leading organizations are already starting to come to terms with that and what it means. But we fundamentally believe, and this is why this is so relevant for a conversation, that every consumer-facing organization is going to have to take a position and work through this. And again, it's just useful as context just to think about some of the numbers that we're already seeing. So there are already coming up to about 1 billion people who are using tools like ChatGPT at least once a week. And in the work that we do engaging with consumer segments around the world, what we're already finding is that 36% of those consumers already regard AI as a good friend. It has a very different relationship than using tools like Google and so on have historically. And it's driven by this idea of it being a very human technology, that it provides very specific recommendations, it provides recommendations in the style of the user, and as you'll hear from the panelists as well, it's also increasingly getting to the actionability of those recommendations, this evolution into agents working on your behalf. And when we see that from the work again that we're doing, already 9% of consumers who are using this at least once a week, so we're not talking about techno geeks, those that are using this at least once a week, 9% of those folks would say already that they would be willing to have the AI transact on their behalf. And 40% of people are saying that they would be willing to have it get them all the way through to a clickable basket, i.e. it's making the filtering decisions on their behalf. And that is if you think about that, it's a very, very profound evolution. And that's also impacting the store experience. So one of the things that we looked at before coming into the holidays was you can hear me if it's coming up, was the degree to which in-store employees are also starting to see about half of the in-store employees that we saw were already looking to see users using ChatGPT or tools like that to enhance the shopping experience physically in the outlet as well. So it's really infusing across the entire value chain. So the first thing that we're seeing here is how AI is really changing how consumers discover. And it's looking at this movement from moving to look from an item to actually to drive really much more of an experience overall. And so that could be a hotel room, it could be a TV, it could be a box of cereal, but we're seeing this now starting to come to life in a very different ways. And I'd like to turn to Naveen for his initial thoughts on that one.
Yeah, sure. Great intro, I guess, there around the thematic progress of where AI is kind of driving the consumer behavior. So at Marriott, we kind of started our experimentation phase a couple years ago, just like most companies, and we're still in deep discovery in certain areas. But our approach has been anchored on this formation of what we call an AI studio, and the studio has representatives from across our company, technology, legal, privacy, et cetera, that came together and prioritized a set of use cases that we wanted to deliver across our 3 customer personas. So at Marriott, we serve our 800,000 employees, we call associates. We also serve our 250 plus million Bonvoy members. And if you're not, please see me after this. And also our owners and franchisees who invest with us. So these use cases were prioritized across those 3 customer personas. In terms of the guest persona that you just talked about, we're transitioning from what we call the search era to an understanding era. And for us, the way it manifests is we went live with a feature, Ask Bonvoy or Ask AI feature on one of our products called Homes and Villas by Marriott Bonvoy. It's live out there, and we're scaling it now. So you could, in the past, go to this portal, the Omnibox, and ask a question with a destination as the keyword. We're moving away from a destination-based search to more of a natural language search. So today, you can go to homesandvillas.com, and you can type in a phrase like a place to read, write, and watch the sunset. Right? And then we would then take that utterance and break it into multi-prompts and send it to the back end to be able to then understand what is the intent of the customer, look up the customer persona, their background, their preferences, et cetera, and then serve those recommendations in real time to the user that are tailored and personalized to that user. So we're now, taking the learnings from that and then expanding it to broader Marriott.com and then other endpoints that we have. But like I said, we're in the early phases of it, and we're seeing some very interesting behavior emerging from the consumers. And I know we were talking last night or whenever we met, or 2 days ago, about most of our consumer behavior, although it's a natural language search, they're still using keywords as the prompt. So we're going to see some over time organic change in how that works. That's one example.
Yeah. Yes, time is elusive here at CES. Who knows what
that's
we're
right.
at? I don't know. Maybe I'll start with the customer a little bit and just some of the behavior that we're currently seeing at Best Buy from our customer and how they're shopping. If I take a really big step back, I would say that the shopping journey remains pretty similar. They're still doing discovery. They want to be inspired. They move into shop, where they want to be able to have concrete details to make informed decisions. They move to buy, and they want that to go fast. They want buy to be seamless and quick. And then they move into this phase that at Best Buy we call it enjoy, but it's basically when customers are using or getting the life out of that product. And that can be a little bit more complex. So you can see how AI tools might really help a customer get more out of that product. So if that's the highest level, what I would say AI is doing, in particular in discovery, is accelerating that time period. So what would have taken a customer quite a long time to really do deep consideration on a highly considered product like consumer electronics, they can really now truncate that quite quickly because the AI tools are doing that analysis and really digging into the product features and specs. The AI tool can even do comparisons. And I think what's interesting about AI tools, Gemini or Chat, that it can take the context. I think you mentioned, Naveen, that they can put in reading, wanting to write, and sunset all together. And so AI can take that context and then serve up really interesting options for consumers. So I think what we're seeing is this almost collapse of that discovery phase. What I will say, similar to what you're seeing related to keywords, is on our site, customers continue to use keywords as the main tool. And so I do think one thing that we've learned is that you have to give them a cue or a signal that it might be an AI-enabled tool and can manage conversational. Otherwise, they tend to sort of go back into using keywords. My hypothesis is that will not last for long. I think eventually you're going to see a convergence of search, and it will be search again, and people will go in and out of using keywords or using some type of conversational prompt. So those are some of the things that we're seeing and how we've seen consumer behavior evolve with new tools.
That's great, thank you. And what I want to do now is just turn a little bit to the evolution of AI agents in particular. So the degree to which we're already starting to see agents actually impact purchasing decisions. And fundamentally, if we're getting to the point where agents, rather than humans, are starting to make that first cut on what those purchasing outcomes will be. How do you see that impacting your business, and how do you think you'll actually take steps to address it? Maybe start with you, Naveen.
Yeah, sure. I mean, early days again, right? The agentic web, as we talk about, is something that is the next generation evolution of where this tech is going. So at Marriott, the way we approach it is a little bit more agnostic to whether it's a native AI tool like a Chat GPT or a Perplexity trying to hit our infrastructure, or a personal agent that in the future could be impersonating a user and then talking to the backends. So since I hope there's some tech audience here, we're going to geek out for 1 minute. The way we're calling this a horizontal chassis that we're building that is going to be agnostic to any of the requests that would come from these emerging endpoints. And the way we think about it is having an agentic mesh that would be based on known protocols as we have today with an MCP backend that then takes the request from an agent and transfers the context of what the guest is looking for or an associate is looking for, and then go towards the back end. And our construct is to delay that call to the LLM as far as possible, because every time you make that call, you're kind of using the tokens, right? And then the meter keeps running around. So we believe we have the best data about our hotels in our vector databases, in our graph databases. We believe we have the best information about our guests in our database. So we would like to decorate the responses as much as possible from our known repositories, our knowledge graphs, and the user graphs that we're building. And then where that response needs to be added with additional context as we make that call to the LLM. And the way we're also thinking about the LLM is today's frontier model could be something in the past tomorrow. So we're building an agnostic layer within that chassis that I just described, where we would pick the right model for the right context for that right customer in near real time, and then be able to service that. And on the outbound, we're also looking at technologies where we could cache some of those responses just enough so that we're not really leaving the four walls of Marriott, right? So as MCP continues to emerge as A2A, agent-to-agent protocols, and also the one thing that I believe separates an agent from a bot, right? The traditional bot, as we know about, is the fulfillment, is being able to complete the transaction on behalf of a guest, in this case, for our industry. So that means you get into things like, how are we going to figure out security construct? How do we trust an agent to take your credit card off of your wallet, off of your profile, and put it as a method of payment against purchase of a suite, right? And then, so what is that access control mechanism like? I did say early days in that, but we would like to think about it as an agnostic, think of it as a universal port that you can plug in a native AI tool, you can plug in an agent, you could plug in any third party, because we know our products, we also distribute them not only on Marriott.com, but also on Booking.com and our OTAs and other GDSs that are out there, Global Distribution Systems, sorry for the acronyms. But so our tech approach is going to be that agnostic layer that we're building, and we're hoping to kind of go to market sometime in the 26 timeframe.
Right. Chris?
Yes, it's interesting. The agnostic point, I think, is key. And we see a lot of this through the eyes of our retailers. That's our predominant route to market. So if you look at Amazon with their Rufus AI agent, and I think they've already announced something like a 60% increased propensity to buy. Well, 20 years ago, we used to worry how we showed up on the physical shelf. Then we had to worry about how we showed up on the digital shelf. Now we need to know how we show up in Rufus. And to the agnostic point, you look at what Walmart are doing with Sparky, same thing.
Right.
You look at Walmart's engagement with OpenAI, so you can directly purchase through GPT. We need to make sure we show up with our products, with our recipes, with the right information. And it's a bit different to the digital shelf. Having the right data, the right agnostic platform, and the right ability to engage on that is absolutely key. And I know from personal experience, it's amazing how the world's moved in a year. I never felt in a retailer for food that you'd spend a lot of time doing this. But I was driving to my local supermarket not so long ago. I was deciding what I needed to buy, and I asked it to order the sequence of products for that supermarket, and it got it wrong. And I was disappointed. So it's amazing how fast. I think we need to look not just at what's happening now, but what's going to be happening in the next 2-3 years as well, and stay ahead of it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And what I want to do now is just move from the concept about discovery and purchasing to that full experience altogether, because obviously the biggest part of the engagement with any product or service happens after that initial point of purchase has made. So just want to talk a question to Chris really about how do you see AI actually impacting that experience after that initial point of purchase?
Yeah, having just come across from the area where it's all about media and marketing and advertising, you sometimes forget about the actual product that we consume, whether it's a stay somewhere, whether it's electronic, or whether it's food in our case. The product and that consumption experience is really what we need to enable. The path to purchase is just one piece of it, and sometimes we talk too much about just that. If the product isn't good, it doesn't work. And to make that product good, we've got to worry about the full value chain, not just the path to purchase. So that's super important. That goes from the consumer insight we talked about earlier, but then it comes to how you drive innovation. And we're using AI to shorten our innovation cycle, to identify concepts, but also to narrow down which concepts might really work. We're using it to optimize recipes, optimize them not just for taste, but for taste, for cost, for sustainability. That gets quite complex. We have to go right back to the farms in how we procure our ingredients. AI has an impact on how we drive sustainability at the individual farms that we don't own, but we engage with. It has an impact on how we procure, how we negotiate our contracts. It's having an impact in our factories. For how do we drive energy efficiency? How do we improve product quality? How do we optimize yield and asset intensity? And then through supply chain, through ocean freight, through logistics. And then, of course, on top of that, there's the path to purchase, how we drive marketing insight, how we drive path to purchase, sales, B2B, and B2C. So we've really got to look at that full value chain. Because otherwise, we're not producing a product, we're not adding value to our consumer. So we have to start from the consumer, make sure we've got a product that's bringing value to them, and the path to purchase is just the final closure of that. But we have to worry about the full value chain the whole way through.
Makes sense. Vivian, any thoughts from a travel perspective?
Yeah, I think the theme is very similar across. I love the path to purchase, right? That's just one transaction moment in time across the customer journey. Our customers are, typically they're dreaming, and then they're kind of searching and shopping, and then they end up booking, and then eventually they come stay at our hotels, which is where the service aspect of what we offer comes to life. And then post-day, they, hopefully they advocate. And then that flywheel kind of continues, and the approach has to be really wholesome, and it needs to traverse the entire life cycle versus just zeroing on just the conversion funnel, which of course we should be thinking about it, but just not that.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear both of you talk about the steps you take or how you think about that post-purchase. In consumer electronics, it's obviously ripe for things that can go wrong, whether that's delivering a large appliance or installing a television or helping a consumer really figure out how they're going to use their new AI-enabled laptop. So there's a lot of complexity there, and I think what we're finding is it takes both AI and human touch to fully realize that and help consumers. We really do think about that. I talked about it in as Discovery Shop by Enjoy, and that Enjoy period it is a differentiator for us. Like, we are really able to be there for consumers in that time frame of their shopping experience, and we're certainly using AI tools to help enable that and bring that to life for them. But I think that is a critical portion of the journey that certainly differentiates Best Buy.
Yeah, can I add one example to kind of make it real for our industry, right? So, and we were talking about this as well. So when you check in at the front desk and you see the front desk associate super busy, mired in looking at multiple systems to welcome you and check you in and honor your preferences and cut a key, right? And what's happening behind the scenes is in a legacy people serving people industry like ours, we deployed multiple systems over time that the associate has to traverse. We call it the swivel chair. So think about a scenario where we build this single pane of glass capability powered by AI, where we can now source different data points across these systems in real time to that to the associate, so they can then service the guest and have a heads up experience as opposed to a heads down experience. And just like something as simple as that, and you might be wondering how hard can that be, but our mainframe's 60 years old, and our property management systems are 40 years old, and Raj is sitting there where you guys are helping us rebuild all of that. So that's something as simple as that, giving those data in real time using AI, and then helping that consumer go to their room when they're kind of tired is amazing for us.
It's a great point. If we think about our engagement of our sales teams with customers, even before the consumer step,
right.
When we started analyzing the amount of time they're spending on administrative tasks, preparing for meetings or preparing data or piecing information together, it's huge. Mm-hmm. And the more we can free up that time and better equip them with the information they need to give a good customer experience, good customer engagement, and focus on it, that's gold dust.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful link into what I wanted to get to, and there's a question for Jeannie as we go on. This obviously more and more of the journey is being informed or enhanced by AI, but the human touch part of this is also absolutely vital. So I just want to get a sense of examples where you're seeing how that AI piece can really enhance that nature of that kind of human part of the experience as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is the more we lean into technology and leverage AI, I do think it almost creates this craving for human connectivity. And I truly believe there are some things that a human can bring magic to that no LLM is ever going to be able to do. And then there are certainly jobs to be done, tasks. I'll give a couple of examples. I talked about appliances, delivering an appliance, or delivering a home theater setup, and really making it meet the needs of that customer requires understanding their context, understanding what's going on in their life, asking them questions that they may not even know to ask or to think about. And so I think there's a human touch that comes with that piece, and certainly fueled by AI. AI can power that in the backdrop. Maybe that customer did all of their research before they walked into the store, but that human connectivity or getting even that affirmation or empathy around the situation, I think goes so far. And I'm obviously a brand strategist, and so I think about how my brand is coming to life. Our Blue Shirts and our Geek Squad agents, they are truly the manifestation of the brand. That is human powered. So we're a brand that is really led by human beings, and we're solving human problems. And so I don't think that you really get around that. I really think about AI, and I hate to reduce it to this, but I think about it as a tool that helps humans do the things that they want to do even better.
Yeah.
Well said, really well said. And I said we're a people serving people business, and this is not just a buzzword, but when we say human-centered, tech-enabled, data-driven, we kind of really take it to heart. We're in this massive multi-year digital and tech transformation, and we're going to really follow those principles. And we didn't start with tech. We started with the business process and the human first, and then work backwards to technology. So with 800,000 associates that wake up every single day wearing a Marriott name tag, and they're serving the guests, when I talk to them, I tell them that the thing that I'm not super crazy about in the acronym AI is A. A stands for artificial. But I would like to think about it more as A for augment, A for aid, A for assist, A for any other but not artificial, right, for me speaking to that audience. So when we kind of phrase it that way, that this is really to enhance the service and the level of service, that you offer today to the customer, so you actually spend meaningful time in engaging with the guest and empathizing with the guest. So that's not going to change with AI, right? That human touch and human connection is not going to change.
Yeah, it's the Iron Man rather than Terminator idea fundamentally coming to life. What I want to do then is just shift a bit of the conversation to then talk a little bit about how, as organizations, you are organizing yourselves to prepare for this era, because obviously this involves a huge organizational change, rethinking of that. So what I want to get a sense of, and I'll start with Chris, is how are you thinking about taking those steps and really preparing for the changes that are now coming?
Yeah, I think in a way we've already touched on some points of it, because it's not about starting with AI. It's about starting with your purpose, your strategy, what you're trying to achieve, and working back from that and doing that across the full value chain. So we don't think of this as you throw AI at the problem and that solves or changes the problem. It is a fundamental transformation, and AI changes the amount of transformation that we can do. So we can think of that across four main levers. The first is, obviously there's the strategy and what you're trying to achieve, but then the first lever we drive is really what's the operating model, the end-to-end processes across the full value chain. And we've identified 9 end-to-end process areas that we want to focus on. 3 of them are grouped largely around the funnel, insight to execute, innovation, and the sales aspects. And then 3 are grouped largely around our operational value chain, from the farms all the way through to ensuring the product's physically available. And then there's financial decision-making investment, and then the HR and the people experience in our own company. We have 300,000 employees, and their experience is important, otherwise the AI is not brought to bear. So the first thing we think about is that end-to-end operating model in those business processes, and recognizing that that has to fundamentally change. It's not just throw AI at the existing model. The second is, for that new model to work, we realize the skills people need is very different. And that's not just about the IT and the tech people, that's about the company as a whole. So we're investing, and I think the human adoption versus the AI capability and getting that balance right is going to be key. So we're investing a lot in, are we making people comfortable with working with digital assistants to augment them and to improve processes? That skill is a behavior thing, and so it's beyond a skill. So the human upskilling is key. Then we think about where and how is work getting done. We talked a lot about the content creation and marketing conversion, and we're finding that you need to create factories to do this. Factories of real intelligence, competence centers and things. So we're increasingly changing how work's getting done. It's changing our relationship with the agencies. It's changing us from being a country-by-country operation to a more globalized operation, and then adapt at the last mile. So that service aspect is key. And then, of course, there's what I do, which is the AI, data, and technology piece that enables all of that and help to get it to run. But if you don't change the other 3, the end-to-end process and operator model, the people skills, the where work gets done, then actually you're not really transforming. You'll optimize a bit, and AI will help a bit, but it's not going to create a fundamental shift. And I think what we're all talking about here is, how do you make the fundamental shift in the way a business operates today?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And before we go to questions from the audience, just maybe one last question for all of you. We're at CES. There's obviously a huge amount of innovation that's occurring here. So as you think about that, are there any particular industries or companies that you're looking at to sort of start to create ideas that can also germinate and develop in your thinking as well?
Absolutely. There's 2 amazing companies I admire. One is Nestle. The other one's Best Buy. So that'll be my answer.
Besides the 2 gentlemen that are up here with me, I agree. I've learned a lot in this conversation. I think Instacart's doing some really interesting things. And then I think Delta has long been on sort of the cutting edge of creating personalized experiences and leveraging data to do that. So those are 2 brands that I watch carefully.
Perfect.
And again, beyond the 2.
That was beautiful.
I tend to look at industries that I see moving at a different pace, where things could apply before it applies to our industry. Our industry is very physical. So physical creates a certain constraint. So I tend to look a lot at what the banks and financial services are doing, because it's a very digital engagement, a very regular engagement. I think they're moving at pace. And then I also look at industries that are under a lot of disruption and threat. And the automotive one there for me, on the more manufacturing side, are doing some really interesting things because they have to fundamentally change and evolve. So that one as well is key. So I tend to look at what industries are going to have a capability before we do. The third one for me would be the healthcare pharma industry, because in R&D, there's a huge reason for them to invest before we do in some of the capabilities. So watching that and seeing how can we adapt that and how does the cost base of doing so become applicable to our industry and at what point in time.
That's perfect. Wonderful. Great stuff. So what I'd like to do at this point, I know we've got a couple of mics. So if I'd like just to turn to the audience, if you've got questions for the panelists.
I don't need a mic. I'm loud. So all three of you guys have amazing brands. And you started on this, but it really worries me. Agentic commerce disintermediates the brand. How do I keep my brand relevant, given that?
I'll start there, because my favorite brand within our brands is Nespresso, as you know. And I think this is where the thing that comes in, it comes back to that consumption experience, is we can do all the marketing in the world, we can do X, Y, and Z. If we're not providing a high quality product that is competitive and better than competition, then it's not good enough. And that's not just the physical product, it's the packaging, it's the service, it's the experience that goes around it. That's got to be better. And in fact, one of the things that we've been learning a bit in this area is reinforcing the need to have a great product and make sure it fits the right way to the consumer. That's got to be the advantage. It can't just be marketing and funnel closure, because that's not long-term sustainable. So we've reinforced what it means from an R&D point of view, from a taste preference point of view, testing that on a regular basis, because we have to maintain an advantage there. You're absolutely right. The chance of being disintermediated is definitely that.
Yeah, I probably a slightly different take, only because agentic commerce stops after you buy the product. We own the stay. At the end of the day, you still need to show up in our hotel and go to your room and order that snack from the bar and have a fulfilling experience. So we see it slightly differently in the sense that there's an emerging channel, for lack of a better word, agentic commerce, and it's going to be smarter, it's going to be better, and it's going to remove a lot of friction from the buying process, but the fulfillment and the stay still remains in the safe hands of 800,000 associates. So that's where we're going to excel, and we're going to continue to excel and separate ourselves from the competition.
Yeah, that's great. I think the only thing that I would add, I have had this on my worry wall. I have a worry wall, things I'm worried about being disintermediated, and maybe I've gone through some of the stages of acceptance. And I think it's really, for me, I'm thinking about how do we show up where consumers are at? And we've done that. We've done it multiple, we've all gone through the web, we've gone through influencers, we've gone through social media. And so I think this is that next stage of that. And so how do we think about ways where we show up in a meaningful manner for our customer? And if that is through agentic commerce, so be it. That's how we're going to show up. The second thing I would add is I think there are certain parts of the experience with which both these gentlemen have hit on that the platforms are not going to want to deal with because they are hard. Things like returns, things like supply chain, things like delivering products. Those are just aspects that retailers have specialization in, and it could happen. But I think they're going to want to separate that portion, and so we'll continue to own that experience.
Other questions?
Do you think the element of trust in how you apply AI to, let's say, the exploration phase is going to be important? It's almost like if I think about Best Buy, a blue shirt, you have an opportunity to actually create a lot of trust with AI versus, let's say, a blue shirt. Do you think that's going to be important as you put this in practice?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think if you talk to the platforms, they will tell you that the same principles that we've had over the last number of years with search remain true. You have to have credible information. You have to that people can trust. And so I think that will remain a very critical aspect of brands. And I think now we'll do that, both continue to do it through digital content that shows up, as well as continue to do it with our associates that are knowledgeable and are experts and do put the customer at the heart of what they do. And so trust will be, I think that'll also gets to your question around like driving relevancy. I think as a brand, you have to be able to build trust and deliver on that for consumers.
And part of it is, as you said, the thing the agentic platforms can't deal with. It's the difficulty of the returns, the challenges, the problems, and dealing with those. So that the trust with the consumer has to be there, and it's fundamental.
Other questions?
Just one over there.
Hi, excellent talk today. Thanks, team. Question for you: how are you tackling B2C versus B2B consumers? Because obviously there's different expectations from those consumers.
You want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, so the delineation is in our minds kind of pretty clear. B2B, for us, the way it manifests is where we're selling our products to OTA or a global distribution partner, and they would then sell it on our behalf to the guest. In that scenario, the question always ends up being who owns the customer. Is it the intermediary, or is it the fulfillment engine, in this case, our company? So the way we've dealt with that traditionally is we have partnerships with our B2B partners where there's customer data sharing, the practices that we honor and we have to have in play to be able to service that guest. In a B2C, a direct consumer interaction model, I mean, look, we just last year, 2025, we had 1 billion unique visitors on our website that created a relationship with us, and we engage with them with deep personalization, with being able to really identify and anticipate what that customer needs are. So it's much easier through that channel than a B2B directly. But I think the fundamentals are, I think, still the same in terms of how you want to strategize it and build around it.
I completely agree. The majority of our business is B2B.
Right.
We sell through retailers, we sell through distributors, we do some direct-to-consumer like Nespresso and so on. So you have to think, these are different channels, and you have to manage the customers, the B2B customers, but you still have to create the awareness with the consumers. And the other part is, the final experience is the consumer. It's not the customer. You have to make sure they have a successful business, that they have good margins, that they're profitable, that they grow with your products. But the final experience, like in your hotels, like with your products and sales, is the way they experience it in the home, in the restaurant, or as they taste something. So we still have to, I think of these as there's sales channels. We have to manage all of them. There are some nuances, but AI plays a role in all. But ensuring the final consumption experience is right, where often there's no digital engagement for us. That's what really matters. And everything else, a bit like agentic commerce is another channel. We need to manage those channels effectively so that we can be where the consumer is going to buy our product.
Other questions? Okay. Great stuff. Wonderful. Well, any other final closing comments from you before we wrap up?
We'll start with Chris.
So my two favorite companies are here. But in all seriousness, I think the big thing is there's always a lot of talk about the tech itself. Tech opens up new possibilities, but fundamentally this is about our purpose as a business. How do we transform given what technology can now do, or AI, data, and technology can now do? But it is a fundamental transformation, and we need to really rethink the way our businesses operate. We need to think about the mix of channels. But the most important thing is that we maintain the right product experience to the consumer, as well as make sure the product's available to them. So we must never forget that. Everything else is just getting there, but that consumption experience, that's what brings people back.
Yeah, I think my observation would be this topic of AI. There's probably not a meeting you're going to where it's not coming up, or a brand that's coming up to you telling you they have AI. And then I think the majority of this discussion has been about people and consumers and what they need and what they're doing in their lives. And so I think you've said it, we've all kind of said it, putting the customer at the heart of what you do and thinking about what's going on in their lives and how you can solve their problems, that's the best place to start. And then the tools, whatever they are, will fall into place.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, for us, a few things, right? We're all learning at the same time. I think this someone's ahead, someone's behind is just a figment of imagination. There is a lot this technology is promising and will deliver for sure. So having a disciplined approach to your AI portfolio and AI pursuit is very important. A couple of years ago, we were literally chasing every little announcement and every little activity that was going on, and we said, okay, we want to really come back to what's our core strategic focus, and having a disciplined portfolio approach is super important, number one. Number two, as a technologist, I have to say this, take that disciplined approach and permeate it into the architecture of how you're conceiving these new emerging channels and new emerging technologies as well. Having an approach that is layered, having an approach that is composable, that can deliver at the speed of the business is super critical, right? So the fundamentals are not any different. The building blocks are still the same, but it took us a little bit to kind of get back to the basics of how we want to do development. Because a couple of years ago, we were tightly coupling every use case to a model. And clearly, that's not a scalable way because models keep evolving and models keep changing with context windows, all over the place. So hence the agnostic nature of model gateway kind of came into play, et cetera. So think of technologies as horizontals. Think of these layered approaches and composable. As long as you build it that way, I think you will always be in lockstep with where you're trying to go. And those were two major learnings for us. And someone did say policy, real policy and trust. That's got to be by design. It cannot be an afterthought because all these models have drift. Your brand reputation is super important. Having red teams that are really, really testing your AI implementations before you launch them at scale. And then having a kill switch just in case something were to go wrong, quickly be able to turn something off, right? So I think I'm super excited, but I couldn't agree more with my fellow leaders here on the panel. The customer at the center.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Look, I'd like, as we're closing, I'd like to thank all the panelists for those wonderful insights. Really super interesting. And obviously, we're seeing this as the heralding of a very different era where this is going to continue to evolve very, very rapidly. A lot of the things we're talking about today, we would not have expected to see even 12 months ago with the same level of emphasis. It's moving incredibly quickly. And I suspect CES next year, it'll evolve even further. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And please join us afterwards for refreshments. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.